It's Thursday, the 9th of July 2020. Welcome back to the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. My name's Pete Fairbairn, and the premise is very simple. It's 5 of the biggest sports stories making news right now. It's less than 15 minutes. We keep it short and sharp. It's out before 8 o'clock. And the most important part of all is that it's not my opinions and insights you want to hear. It's some of Australia's top journalists who come on the show and take turns telling us exactly what's happening behind the scenes. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by Brad Walter from NRL.com, one of Australia's top rugby league journalists with decades of experience in the sport. How are you, Brad?
I'm really good, Pete. Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. We're going to start in NRL, and it's a bit of a will he, won't he, has he, hasn't he situation with David Fifita, obviously one of the most exciting young players in the game, comes off contract at the end of this year with the Brisbane Broncos. And it's been a bit of an ongoing saga. Would he stay with the Broncos? Big interest from the Rabbitohs, Gold Coast Titans as well. Talk me through the current state of play in a pretty hectic 24 hours there.
Yeah, it has been a drawn-out saga, but it's coming to a head. But David Fifita still struggling to make a decision. He's, according to his mum, Gwen, who's heavily involved in, I suppose, guiding him. He changes his mind every day. And the obvious example of that is that on Tuesday night, he rang the Broncos coach, Anthony Seibold, to say that he was going to take up a lucrative offer with the Gold Coast Titans. It's believed that the Titans' offer was worth about $1.1 million and the Broncos had offered him $700,000. But when he woke up on Wednesday morning, he changed his mind. He told the Broncos that he decided he wanted to stay and he was going to accept the lesser offer. He then rang Justin Holbrook, the Titans coach, and then the Titans came back to him later on with a revised offer, and now he's undecided again. I'm not sure where he will be at today or what he will do today. He wants to make a decision before he returns from injury next week, so a decision is imminent. He feels the need to make one. If it's believed that the Titans' latest deal is worth $1.25 million for one season only, that would make him the highest paid player in the game. He's a fantastic talent. There's no doubt that the Titans could really build a team around him. But for one season, there's the possibility that, he would then therefore be on the market and available for other clubs to approach from November. So before he's even played a game for the Titans, he's at loggerheads with his agent, and that's why he only wants to do a 1-year deal. He's still got another year on his agreement with his agent, so he doesn't want to do a long-term deal. He's been offered, deals 5, even up to 10 years have been reported. It's a big decision for David Fifita.
It's a massive decision, huge implications for a Brisbane Broncos club, obviously in turmoil, and a Titans club which hasn't seen a lot of success on the field over recent years. For those of you watching on Facebook and YouTube, you will have seen the Golden Strainer make its first appearance. That's how we make sure we move from one topic to another pretty quickly. Really quickly though, Brad, how much of a bargain would he be for the Broncos, even for 12 months, if they could get him for $500,000 less than the Titans are offering?
Yeah, he'd be an absolute bargain given his market value. And look, the Broncos have invested a lot of money in a really talented young forward pack, but David Fifita is arguably the best of a lot of them.
The second story we're going to talk about in the NRL is really good news for the Melbourne Storm. Obviously, we know they've been forced to relocate to Queensland due to the COVID restrictions in Victoria, based themselves on the Sunshine Coast, and confirmation coming through yesterday that not only can they use that as a training base, they're actually going to be able to play 3 home matches at Sunshine Coast Stadium. Brad, from my perspective, looking at this is a massive advantage for the Storm to be able to train and play in the same location, and really gives them a really fantastic chance to cement a top 4 or even a top 2 spot on the ladder this year.
Well, it's not an advantage compared to the other clubs. You've got to remember most of them, except for the Warriors, are training and playing at their home grounds. And they're disadvantaged in some ways by being away from home. But it's really positive for the Storm's premiership aspirations that for the next month they don't have to travel away from the Sunshine Coast. Their only away game is in Brisbane against the Broncos. They're going to have 3 games on the Sunshine Coast. So that's going to be really helpful. The players are in camp together as well. I think that's good from a football perspective as well. So they're just going to be there training and playing.
That story coming from Sam Phillips in the Sydney Morning Herald, and our first one this morning coming from NRL.com with Dan Walsh. We're going to swap to a different sport now. Mark Robinson's opinion piece in the Herald Sun's caught my eye this morning, Brad. There's been a lot of outcry, a lot of social media trolls, a lot of people lining up to take shots at the AFL players who are going off, in their words, on a holiday as they head to hubs. The Victorian teams all needing to relocate interstate. Robinson has come out with a fairly impassioned plea that we should be really grateful to the AFL players. They are all taking 50% salary cuts. They are all forced out of home into lockdown, essentially, within these resorts just to keep the game going for the fans and for the other people employed within the game. Where do you sit? Which side of the fence are you on here?
Yeah, I'm with Mark Robinson. I thought that was a really interesting article as well. I think people don't understand the business of sport, basically, the business of football, the football codes. Imagine if the players didn't go interstate, if the players didn't make these sacrifices, there'd be no football. If there's no football, there's thousands and thousands of people in the sport, at grassroots level as well as at the top level, and also in the media and broadcasting, they're suddenly out of a job or their pay packages are severely impacted and worse than they already are. So, look, the players are going to be away for a minimum of 6 weeks, or away from their families. Their families are stuck back in Victoria. They're in lockdown, many of them. They've got to go to work, they've got to look after kids, they might have to do homeschooling. It's a really difficult situation for these players to be away from their families for that period of time. There's great uncertainty, and it all happened in a hurry. And they're doing that to keep the competition going. And there's restrictions on them when they go to New South Wales and particularly to Queensland. Players are stuck in a bubble, and they pretty much can train and play, and they're not going out and socialising. They're not having a good time. Yes, they can do. They've got the opportunity maybe to play golf together or go for a surf and things like that. And that obviously that's something that people in Melbourne can't currently do. But there's very, very, they're making a lot of sacrifices, a lot of other things that they can't do. And as I said, there's a lot of people that are relying on the AFL and sport to keep going for their jobs, and they're not in those bubbles. They might be back in Melbourne or somewhere else. But without these players making those sacrifices, those people are going to be out of work.
It gets thrown around a lot, the amount of money athletes earn and how fortunate they are to be in the position they're in, and how we'd all love to swap places with them. The flip side of that, of course, is that these aren't long-term careers for these athletes. If they're lucky, they'll get 6, 8, 10 years out of it. A lot of these guys are only going to get 2 or 3 years of a crack at being a professional athlete. It could all be over, with a serious injury or a delisting tomorrow. So in general, is it time for the society in general to start taking a different perspective on the sacrifices these players are making, not just in the current climate, but just in general when they're putting their body on the line for the entertainment for fans?
Well, not every player is on top dollar either. There's a lot of guys at the bottom of the pile, and this is their only income, and they're trying to preserve their income. As you pointed out, they've already taken a 50% pay cut. Players' careers are short, so it's not like a job where they can earn top dollar for 50 years or 40 years or whatever in a career. They're going to make as much as they can while they can.
We move to our penultimate story now. In the Sydney Morning Herald, Georgina Robinson has an update on the possibility of a Trans-Tasman Super Rugby competition kicking off in 2021. Robinson with some intel from where New Zealand rugby sits on this. Apparently half of the board in New Zealand favours a model that only has 2 Australian teams within it. The suggestion being that if Australia couldn't have a stronger presence in a Trans-Tasman competition, they might look to go at themselves, a Big Bash-style domestic tournament, bring in international players from the likes of South Africa, Argentina. Brad, I want to put to you, how important is it that Australia does have a Trans-Tasman competition with New Zealand and does have a significant presence in terms of the number of teams in that competition?
Yeah, I think Rugby Australia's got to pursue the Trans-Tasman model, but they've got to get a better deal than the one that apparently is favoured by some people in New Zealand rugby, which is only for 2 Australian teams to compete in this competition, along with 5 New Zealand teams and a Pacific team. We obviously need more teams. I'm assuming the 2 would be New South Wales and Queensland. But yeah, we need to have 4 or 5 teams competing in a 10-team Trans-Tasman competition. The problem with a domestic-only competition really is, where's the money coming from? Is it viable? It's great to say we're going to have overseas players coming here, but I think the reality is that we would have Australian players heading overseas, and we'd end up like soccer basically, with our best players playing in international competitions and not here domestically.
You could argue, and this is a question without notice, but you could argue from a financial perspective that it might actually be in Rugby Australia's best interest to allow that to happen for a few years. Wallabies players all playing overseas. Rugby Australia only needs to pay them test match payments. They can focus on re-energising the club rugby game without a professional competition here in Australia while they get their house in order. Of course, the flip side of that means that if they get it wrong, professional presence is lost forever. Do you think that's a risk worth taking?
No, I think that's too big a gamble. I think they need to try and preserve the professional game and the quality of it the best they can. Kids need to see their stars playing on a regular basis. Like, they need to see them playing for New South Wales, Queensland, the Brumbies, the Rebels. Otherwise, kids are going to lose focus and lose interest as well.
And of course, the Western Force, the other team who, despite being kicked out of the Super Rugby competition a couple of years ago, probably have the most solid financial footing, with the philanthropist Andrew Forrest, their mining magnate, basically bankrolling them. Our final story today, Brad, we turn to the Daily Telegraph and a bit of cricket news from the man I like to call the quasi-CEO of Australian cricket at the moment, in head coach Justin Langer. No disrespect to interim CEO Nick Hockley, but of course, Kevin Roberts leaving that post a couple of weeks ago, and Langer seems to be the most quoted person when it comes to the state of the game there. He's spoken to Ben Horn about the necessity for Australian cricket to get back over to England, play the one-day series in September, release the Australian players to play in the IPL as well, and that in return, hopefully, Indian cricket honours the test series that's meant to happen here over summer. Reading between the lines, it essentially sounds like Langer's saying, if we don't release our players to the IPL, we've got no guarantee that the BCCI, who we know are all powerful and all encompassing, are going to send a team out here. Where does this currently sit?
Well, I think it highlights, as you mentioned, the power that India's got in international cricket at the moment. I think it also underscores the fact that cricket's strength is its international game, but it's also currently its weakness, because sports like AFL and the NRL, or competitions like the AFL and the NRL and rugby, they can continue on at a domestic level or at a Trans-Tasman level and be relatively unaffected, I suppose. But cricket's got it's got a real battle on its hands with working out how the international competition goes. It looks like the T20 is going to be cancelled. Obviously, cricket relies on tours and international teams playing. So there's all sorts of, wheeling and dealing and compromises that are going to need to be made. I sort of agree with, I can see where Justin Langer's coming from in terms of that. If we get offside with India, if we don't appease them by releasing players to go over there, then, maybe they won't come out. And obviously we need, Cricket Australia needs some international competition here next season. Obviously New Zealand would be an obvious opponent, but we need India to come out. Possibly we need a tour to England so we can make some money, because Cricket Australia is, in like all other sports, is affected financially by what's going on.
Yeah, very well said. Brad, before I let you go, I'm going to grab your one to watch in the world of sport today. And just a shout out for those who are watching or listening for the first time, the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. You can get this before 8 o'clock every morning, Monday to Friday, via your podcast app, Spotify, Facebook and YouTube. But Brad, your one to watch in the world of sport today.
Oh, look, just keeping my rugby league hat on, I suppose. The footy's on tonight, the Roosters versus the Cowboys. Valentine Holmes is on the wing for the Cowboys, and I'd be really interested to see how he goes. Before he left to try his hand at NFL, he was considered the best rugby league winger in the world. He's been playing fullback, but I think wing is a position he can really dominate.
And of course, the other action tonight in the AFL, Geelong taking on the Brisbane Lions. Brad, thank you so much for your time and for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Look forward to having you back again soon. Have a great day. Watch some sport tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow morning with Julian De Stoop.